Japan's format just keeps changing even 1 to 2 months after Journey Together has been released, and going into Hot Wave / Heat Wave Arena, the format is just still changing and the decks are continuing to develop in order to combat those top tier decks and become a top tier deck themselves. And one deck that has started popping up that has been known about, in fact I've even been up against this deck myself, I went up against it in Birmingham, it wasn't the exact same list but it was pretty similar, is Froslass. So Froslass is a very, very strong Pokemon with a very strong ability. Its ability Freezing Shroud says that during Pokemon Checkup, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon that has an ability, both yours and your opponent's, except any Froslass. So this ability basically puts a damage counter on every Pokemon with an ability during Pokemon Checkup, yours and your opponent's. So basically every Pokemon with an ability takes 10 damage between turns. And if we look at the Japanese format, there are a lot of decks that play Pokemon with abilities. We have Terrabox, which plays stuff like Lily's Clefairy, you have obviously Fezandipity EX and stuff like that, Teal Mask Ogerpon, Latias, all that kind of stuff. Dragapult, you may be thinking is like, meh, it's free from this, but you need to consider Dracloak has an ability. So while you're building up your board and evolving into Dracloaks, Froslass is going to be putting damage on those Dracloaks. And if you have multiple Froslass in play, the ability stacks. So if you have 3 Froslass in play, all of your Dracloaks are going to be taking 30 damage between turns. So you know your opponent passes over to you, they take 30 damage, and if you're not able to evolve them into Dragapult, you're going to pass back to your opponent and they're going to take 30 more damage. So now they're all going to have 60. And then we have Raging Bolt, which plays obviously Teal Mask Ogerpon, Latias, all those, you know, basic generic support Pokemon. So those are all going to be taking damage. Archelodon itself has an ability, so that's going to be taking away damage. Goldengo, Charizard, N, Gardevoir, all those different Pokemon and decks. And this deck is mainly seen play as a sort of semi-control deck alongside something like Munkidori. Munkidori does have an ability itself, which lets you move 30 damage from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. You see where this is going. You have multiple Froslass in play, and your opponent passes the turn back to you, and you put 30 damage on your own Munkidoris because they have an ability. You attach a Dark Energy, and you can just move that 30 damage onto one of your opponent's Pokemon. And if that opponent's Pokemon also has an ability, it's also taken damage, so now it's taken even more damage. Some lists have also been playing Esperath EX, which for one Psychic lets you do 30 damage plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon, and his ability says that as long as his Pokemon is in the active spot, attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon cost 1 colourless more. So not only does it have an ability, so it's going to take damage that you can then move with Munkidori, but its ability also forces your opponent to dedicate more energy into their active spot, which is then going to power up its own attack. Some lists have also been playing the new Lycanroc alongside Spike Energy, as well as Maractus. Maractus says that if it's in the active spot and is knocked out by damage, you can put 6 damage counters on your opponent's attacking Pokemon. So again, this deck is all about just spreading around a bunch of damage counters to eventually just take multiple knockouts at the same time. And then Lycanroc has the ability Spike Cloak. It says you can use this ability when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve. You attach 2 Spike Energy cards from your discard pile to this Pokemon, and it has the Clutch Fang attack for 3 colourless that does 40 damage plus 40 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So again, if it's a Pokemon with an ability and you've put some damage on it, you can do that extra 40 more damage. So if you have, again, 3 Froslass in play, that's like the minimum you want to get in play, that's 3 damage counters, which means you can do an extra 120 damage plus 40 for 160. More damage counters, the better. So you can very easily KO big EX Pokemon and even Evolution EX Pokemon if they only have a couple of damage counters on them. Plus, Spike Energy itself is pretty decent. It provides a colorless energy, and if the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot and is damaged by an attack, you put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So if you have 3 Spike Energy on your Lycanroc or any of your Pokemon, you could either put it on Maractus and attack with Maractus, as its attack prevents your opponent's active Pokemon from retreating, which is pretty good. So if they attack into it and knock it out, they're going to take 60 damage and then an extra 20 from the Spike Energy, which means that if they attack Lycanroc with 3 Spike Energy, they're going to take 60 damage, and then in Checkup, if it has an ability, Froslass is going to put more damage on it, and you can kind of see how this deck can like spiral very quickly into just putting so many damage counters on the board and possibly taking multiple prize cards, if not all your prize cards at once. However, this deck is better said than done, because it did see a decent amount of success as like a low tier deck, and now it's just gone from the Japanese format. This deck is very much a control slash like rogue deck that's main gimmick is completely dead once you get rid of those Froslass. Even then, Monkey Dory is still a powerful card, so if your opponent's attacking you, you can just move that 30 damage around. But this deck is heavily dependent on Froslass, which if your opponent's able to boss up and knock out, or even if you're up against something like Dragapult, which can just, ping 60 to it, or even like just spread its own damage counters around to knock out all of them at once, it quickly falls apart. However, even then, the deck has still been seeing play and has seen a decent amount of success. It's gotten first place at a couple of city leagues, it's gotten 4th, 5th, it's gotten top 16, top 4 at a couple of city leagues over time. So it's still doing decently well, and people have been incorporating lots of different Pokemon in. Some have been playing it alongside Esparath, some have been playing it alongside Lycanroc, some have been playing it alongside Hops Zacian, which can easily hit 30 damage to the bench. So you're not only putting damage counters on Pokemon with abilities with Froslass, they're moving the damage that you take with something like Monkey Dory. You can then use Hops Zacian to hit a Pokemon in the active and do 30 damage to the bench, possibly take multiple prizes. Plus, Badoo is very, very powerful with this card, obviously, because you can itch Pollen for 10 damage, prevent your opponent from using item cards, and then tick up damage over time with Froslass, which is kind of similar to how obviously Maractus was being used, because you could attack with Maractus, lock your opponent's active Pokemon, and tick up damage, especially if it's a Pokemon that doesn't really have an attack that your opponent can use, and your opponent doesn't play a switching card, because there are a lot of decks in the format that aren't playing switching cards because there isn't really that many control decks. So you could just lock your opponent's active Pokemon, which is completely useless, and just slowly tick away at your opponent's board. The deck has been seeing success, and has been seeing success even in our current format pre-rotation, because Froslass is just that strong of a card, as it punishes decks that heavily rely on abilities, but like it itself plays a lot of Pokemon with abilities, but it can easily play around that with Monkey Dory, because you can just move off the damage that you take onto your opponent's board. But if you're up against a deck that also plays Monkey Dory, you're kind of just adding damage to yourself, which is a bit of a downside, but it's a very rare downside, as there's only like 2 or 3 decks that are playing Monkey Dory. The deck has seen its success and it has seen its play. If it'll see play in our rotation, or even like down the line in the format, with the release of Heatwave and Hotwave Arena, whatever you call it, and future sets, it's all up in the air. But for the time being, it is a very interesting deck and a very interesting controls type of stun deck that players will obviously need to be wary of, because Japan wasn't wary about control decks and it easily climbed its way up. But now people started playing Switch, Turo, all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of dropped down. So in a format where people aren't respecting control decks, it could do very well, which is what we saw happen at the Fukuoka Championship, because Milotic did really, really well because people weren't respecting control decks, so it was able to thrive, and that might just be the same situation with Froslass later in the future. And that is it for this video. I can't think of much else to say about this deck. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Is this a deck that you're looking to pick up? Do you think it will have its time to shine again in a format where people don't respect control decks, or control decks aren't really something that people are worrying about, so on and so forth? Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, all of that nonsense, and I will see you in the next video, whatever it may be. Take care.